The millionaire noticed something strange. While everyone panicked during the robbery, the waitress stood calm, fearless. What happened next revealed she was no ordinary girl. Before we continue, I have to be straightforward. If you don't subscribe now, this might be the last time you see our content. The digital world can separate us unless you follow, comment, and share this video. Don't miss the chance to be part of our growing family. Now, let's delve into today's narrative. Alexander Thornfield adjusted his platinum Rolex as he surveyed the elegant dining room of Le Bernardin, his latest acquisition in Manhattan's restaurant empire. At 33, he'd built a hospitality conglomerate worth $3 billion, and tonight's inspection of his newest property was just another routine business matter. The Michelin-starred establishment hummed with quiet efficiency, crystal glasses catching the warm amber light from handcrafted chandeliers. "Everything appears to be running smoothly, Mr. Thornfield," his assistant whispered, but Alexander barely heard her. His attention had been captured by a young woman moving between tables with an unusual grace. Unlike the other servers who seemed nervous in his presence, this one carried herself with quiet confidence, her long black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing delicate Asian features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Maya Chen had noticed the intimidating man in the $1,000 suit the moment he'd entered with his entourage. She'd worked at Le Bernardin for 6 months, long enough to recognize when the owner was conducting one of his surprise visits. The other servers whispered nervously about Alexander Thornfield's reputation for perfectionism and his habit of firing people on the spot for minor infractions. But Maya had survived worse than demanding bosses. She'd learned long ago that keeping her head down and doing her job well was the key to staying invisible. "Excuse me." Alexander's voice cut through her thoughts as she balanced a tray of wine glasses. "You're handling those glasses like you've been doing this for years, but you don't move like someone who's been waiting tables her whole life." Maya paused, meeting his piercing blue eyes with steady dark ones. "I move like someone who needs this job, Mr. Thornfield. Is there something specific you need?" The directness of her response surprised him. Most employees either fawned over him or cowered in fear. This young woman did neither. "What's your name?" "Maya Chen, sir. I work the evening shift, table sections 12 through 18. How long have you been with us?" 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. The precision of her answer made him raise an eyebrow. "I pay attention to details, Mr. Thornfield. It's important in this line of work." Before Alexander could respond, the front door burst open with explosive force. 3 men in dark hoodies stormed into the restaurant, their faces partially concealed and their intentions immediately clear when one shouted, "Everyone on the ground, now!" Chaos erupted instantly. Diners screamed and dove under tables. Expensive glassware shattered against marble floors and servers dropped their trays in panic. Alexander's security detail started to move, but they were positioned near the kitchen entrance, too far away to be immediately effective. Wallets, phones, jewelry, everything valuable in the bag. The leader, a man with dead eyes and a scar running down his left cheek, waved a pistol menacingly. "Any heroes tonight and people start dying?" Alexander watched in fascination as Maya's entire demeanor shifted. While everyone else displayed various stages of terror, she became perfectly still, her breathing controlled, and her eyes tracking each gunman's position with mathematical precision. She'd moved slightly behind a marble pillar, partially concealed but with clear sight lines to all 3 assailants. "You pretty lady with the ponytail," the scarred leader called out, pointing his weapon directly at Maya. "Start collecting from these rich folks. Move." Maya stepped forward with her hands visible, but Alexander noticed something the gunman missed: her stance. Her feet were positioned in a way that suggested coiled energy, like a spring ready to release. Her center of gravity was lower than normal, and her breathing remained impossibly steady. "Of course," Maya said calmly, approaching the nearest table where an elderly couple sat trembling. "Just please don't hurt anyone." The gunman relaxed slightly, thinking he'd found a compliant helper. That was his first and last mistake. Maya moved with fluid precision that defied physics. In one seamless motion, she grabbed the edge of a marble-topped side table and spun it toward the leader, while simultaneously dropping low and sweeping the legs of the second gunman. The heavy table caught the leader in the midsection, sending him crashing into an ornate wine display. Before the third gunman could react, Maya had rolled behind the bar and launched herself over it in a spectacular aerial maneuver. Her foot connected with his wrist, sending his weapon flying, while her elbow found his solar plexus with surgical accuracy. He crumpled instantly. The second gunman tried to scramble for his dropped weapon, but Maya was already there. She delivered a precise strike to a pressure point on his neck, and he joined his accomplice in unconsciousness. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. The restaurant fell into stunned silence. Maya straightened her uniform, checked her ponytail, and looked around at the debris with genuine concern. "I'm sorry about the mess," she said to Alexander, who stood frozen in amazement. "I know this will require extensive cleanup. Are you seriously apologizing for saving everyone's lives?" Alexander found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. "I'm apologizing for the property damage," Maya replied, her professional mask sliding back into place. "The insurance paperwork alone will be a nightmare." Police sirens wailed in the distance as Alexander's security team finally reached them, looking sheepish and unnecessary. Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Maya, who was now helping the elderly couple back to their feet with gentle reassurance. "Where exactly did you learn to fight like that?" he asked, approaching her carefully. Maya's expression became guarded instantly. "YouTube videos," she said flatly. "Amazing what you can learn online these days." Alexander almost laughed at the obvious lie, but something in her eyes warned him away from pushing. "Right, YouTube." Mr. Thornfield, one of his security guards, interrupted. "The police want statements from everyone." "Should we?" "Handle it," Alexander said without looking away from Maya. "Make sure they know Ms. Chen is a hero, not a suspect." "I'm not a hero," Maya said quietly. "I'm just someone who reacts quickly in dangerous situations. It's not complicated." But it was complicated, Alexander realized. Everything about this woman was complicated. The way she moved suggested years of intensive training. Her situational awareness was military level. Her calm under pressure indicated experience with violence that no 22-year-old waitress should possess. "Have dinner with me," he said suddenly. Maya blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "Tomorrow night. Somewhere quiet, where we can talk without interruption. I'd like to know more about you, Mr. Thornfield. I don't think that's appropriate. You're my boss." "Actually, I'm your boss's boss's boss," Alexander said with a slight smile. "Which makes it even more inappropriate, but I'm asking anyway." "Why?" The simple question caught him off guard. Why was he asking? Because she intrigued him in ways he couldn't define. Because watching her fight had been the most exciting 30 seconds of his privileged life. Because she looked at him like he was just a man instead of a bank account with legs. Because in 33 years of living, I've never met anyone like you, he said honestly. Maya studied his face for a long moment, searching for signs of deception or hidden agenda. "I don't date customers, employers, or men who think they can collect interesting people like trophies." "Which category do I fall into?" "All three." Alexander laughed despite the rejection. "Fair enough, but what if I wasn't your employer?" "You'd still be a customer who thinks I'm some kind of trophy." "And if I promised not to treat you like a trophy?" Maya shook her head. "Mr. Thornfield, we live in completely different worlds. You own restaurants. I clean tables. You wear suits that cost more than my rent. I shop at thrift stores. You collect art. I collect tips. The math doesn't work. Math can be wrong. Not this kind of math." Alexander found himself genuinely frustrated for the first time in years. He was accustomed to getting what he wanted through charm, persistence, or simply writing checks. Maya Chen wasn't impressed by any of his usual tactics. "What would it take?" he asked. "For what?" "For you to have dinner with me." Maya was quiet for so long he thought she might ignore the question entirely. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, but no less determined. "It would take you being someone completely different than who you are, Mr. Thornfield. And since that's impossible, I suggest we both accept reality and move on." She walked away before he could respond, leaving Alexander standing among the broken glass and unconscious criminals. wondering why rejection from a waitress felt like the most significant thing that had happened to him in years. 3 days after the incident at Le Bernardin, Alexander found himself doing something unprecedented. Sitting in the employee break room of his own restaurant at 7 in the morning, nursing a cup of terrible coffee and pretending to review inventory reports. In reality, he was waiting for Maya's shift to begin so he could observe her in her natural environment. What he discovered challenged every assumption he'd made about her background. Maya arrived precisely 15 minutes before her shift, changed into her uniform with military efficiency, and immediately began reviewing the evening's reservations with a focus that bordered on academic. Alexander watched from the kitchen service window as she memorized not just table numbers and guest preferences, but dietary restrictions, anniversary dates, and even the preferred wine selections of regular customers. She's something else, isn't she? Alexander turned to find Henri Dubois, Le Bernardin's head chef, standing beside him with a knowing expression. What do you mean? Maya. That's who you're watching, yes? I've been cooking for 30 years, Monsieur Thornfield, and I recognize precision when I see it. That girl approaches serving tables like a master chess player approaches a tournament. Alexander frowned. Chess player? She thinks 6 moves ahead. Watch her tonight during service. She anticipates needs before guests realize they have them. She knows which tables will order dessert based on their appetizer choices. She can predict when someone will need their wine glass refilled by their conversation patterns. It's remarkable. You think she's overqualified for this job? Henri laughed softly. I think she's overqualified for this planet. But whatever brought her here, she works harder than anyone else and never complains. The other servers respect her because she makes their jobs easier. As if summoned by their conversation, Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway. She moved with the same economical grace Alexander had noticed during the robbery, carrying herself like someone who owned every inch of space around her. Chef Dubois, I noticed Table 7 has dietary restrictions that aren't listed in our system. The reservation notes mention shellfish allergies, but the guest also mentioned avoiding gluten during their last visit. Should I flag this for tonight's service? Of course, thank you for catching that. Maya nodded and started to leave, but Henry called her back. Maya, have you met our owner, Mr. Thornfield? She turned, and Alexander saw the exact moment she spotted him. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture, a subtle defensive positioning that suggested she viewed him as a potential threat. We've met, she said carefully. Mr. Thornfield, is there something you need regarding tonight's service? Actually, yes. I'd like to discuss your background with the company. Your employment file seems unusually sparse. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. I provided all required documentation when I was hired. You provided the minimum required documentation. Most employees include references, previous work experience, educational background. Your file contains a driver's license, social security card, and nothing else. Is there a problem with my work performance? Quite the opposite. Your work is exceptional, which makes your minimal background even more intriguing. Henri sensed the tension and quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the kitchen. Maya remained perfectly still, but Alexander noticed her hands had unconsciously moved to a defensive position at her sides. Mr. Thornfield, I do my job well. I'm punctual, professional, and I don't cause problems. In most places, that's enough. This isn't most places. This is a 3-Michelin-star establishment where every employee undergoes extensive background screening. Then perhaps you should have screened me more thoroughly before hiring me. Alexander found himself smiling despite the obvious rebuff. You're doing it again. Doing what? Turning the conversation back on me instead of answering questions about yourself. It's a sophisticated deflection technique. Or maybe I just value my privacy. Privacy is one thing, mystery is another. The way you fought those men required years of professional training. Your knowledge of wine service suggests formal sommelier education. Your intuitive understanding of fine dining protocols indicates experience in establishments far above this level. And yet you work here as a server, live in a studio apartment in Queens, and act like you've never been anywhere or done anything interesting. Maya was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You've been investigating me. I've been trying to understand you. There's a difference?" "I think so. One comes from suspicion, the other from curiosity." "And which is this?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "Honestly? Both. The way you handled those gunmen was impressive but concerning. That level of skill doesn't come from casual self-defense classes. Maybe I'm just naturally coordinated, and maybe I'm naturally humble." We both know that's not true. Despite herself, Maya's lips quirked upward in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You're asking me to trust you with personal information, but what exactly have you done to earn that trust?" "Fair point. What would it take? For starters, stop investigating my background. If you want to know something about me, ask me directly." "All right. Maya Chen, where did you learn to fight like that?" "My grandfather taught me." "Next question. Where?" "San Francisco's Chinatown next." "Why did you leave?" The almost smile disappeared entirely. "That's not a fair question." "Why isn't it fair?" "Because you're not ready for that answer, and I'm not ready to give it." Alexander felt himself being drawn deeper into the puzzle that was Maya Chen. Every answer she gave raised 3 new questions, and every defensive response made him more determined to understand what she was protecting herself from. "Have dinner with me tonight after service," then he said again. "Mr. Thornfield. Alex, just Alex, and not as your employer, as someone who finds you fascinating and wants to know more. Why is this so important to you?" The question stopped him cold. Why was it important? He dated models, actresses, heiresses, and brilliant businesswomen without feeling this level of compelling interest. What was it about Maya that made him want to break through her defenses? "Because I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who want something from me," he said finally. "Money, connections, social status, business opportunities. But you don't want anything. You actively discourage my interest. In my world, that's so rare it's practically extinct. Maybe I don't want anything because I've learned that everything comes with a price. What if it doesn't? Everything does, Alex. The question is whether you're willing to pay it when the bill comes due." Before he could respond, Maya glanced at her watch and straightened her uniform. "I need to start my shift, if you'll excuse me." She walked away, leaving Alexander standing in the kitchen with the uncomfortable realization that he was pursuing someone who might be running from something far more serious than he'd imagined. But instead of deterring him, the thought only made Maya Chen more compelling. As the evening service began, Alexander positioned himself where he could observe Maya without being obvious about it. Henri had been right. She moved through the dining room like a grandmaster playing chess. She anticipated every need, solved problems before they became visible, and somehow managed to make a room full of demanding millionaires feel like they were her only priority. But it was the small details that captured Alexander's attention. The way she held wine bottles suggested formal training in prestigious establishments. Her conversation with a French businessman flowed effortlessly between English and French, with an accent that spoke of education, not just exposure. When an elderly Italian guest became confused about the menu, Maya switched to fluent Italian without missing a beat. Most telling of all was her interaction with a young couple celebrating their anniversary. The woman was clearly nervous, wearing a dress that had probably cost her a month's salary, intimidated by the elegant surroundings. Maya somehow made her feel comfortable without being condescending, recommending wines that complemented their budget while making the experience feel special rather than economical. "She's got 4 tables, 96 covers tonight, and every single guest thinks they're her favorite," Henri observed, appearing beside Alexander again. "That's not just skill, that's artistry. How does someone that talented end up waiting tables? Same way someone with your intelligence ends up buying restaurants instead of running countries, I suppose. Life is complicated, and people make choices for reasons that don't always make sense to outsiders." Alexander watched Maya deliver a perfectly timed dessert to table 12, while simultaneously catching the eye of a guest at table 15, who needed his wine glass refilled. She made it look effortless, but he could see the tremendous concentration required to orchestrate such seamless service. As the evening wound down, Alexander made his decision. He would wait for Maya after her shift ended, not to pressure her into dinner, but to offer something he'd never offered anyone before: complete honesty about why she intrigued him. What he didn't expect was to find her in the alley behind the restaurant at 1 a.m., practicing martial arts forms with deadly precision under the pale glow of security lights. Alexander stood frozen in the doorway, watching Maya move through what appeared to be an advanced kata with breathtaking fluidity. Her work uniform had been replaced by simple black clothing that allowed unrestricted movement, and her hair flowed loose around her shoulders as she executed techniques that were clearly lethal in their precision. She spun, kicked, struck invisible opponents with combinations that would have been devastating against real attackers. This wasn't casual practice. It was the disciplined training of someone maintaining skills that had taken years to develop. Every movement spoke of muscle memory earned through countless hours of repetition. Maya sensed his presence without breaking rhythm, completing her form before turning to face him with calm alertness. "Mr. Thornfield." "Working late?" "Alex," he corrected automatically. "And yes, apparently not as late as some people. I prefer to practice when there's no audience. How's that working out for you?" Despite herself, Maya smiled. "Not well, apparently." Alexander stepped into the alley, noting how Maya's stance subtly shifted to maintain distance while keeping escape routes clear. That was beautiful. Also terrifying, but beautiful. It's just exercise. That was combat training at a level most military units would envy. "Where exactly did your grandfather teach you to move like that?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the dim light. Something in his expression must have convinced her to drop at least one layer of defensive pretense. "My grandfather was Li Wei Chen. He taught traditional kung fu in San Francisco's Chinatown for 40 years. I started training with him when I was 4 years old." Alexander recognized the name immediately. Li Wei Chen had been legendary in martial arts circles, a master who'd trained champions and whose school had produced fighters who dominated international competitions. "Li Wei Chen was your grandfather? The Li Wei Chen? You've heard of him?" "Anyone who's ever studied martial arts has heard of him. He was considered one of the greatest masters of his generation. His school produced more champions than any other institution in North America." Maya's expression became guarded again. "Most people don't know that much about traditional kung fu. I studied Taekwondo in college. Not seriously, but enough to recognize expertise when I see it. Your grandfather was famous for only accepting students who demonstrated exceptional dedication and natural ability. He made exceptions for family. I doubt that. Li Wei Chen was known for being harder on his relatives than anyone else. If he trained you personally, it's because you had extraordinary talent." Maya began gathering her things, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It was a long time ago." "How long ago did you leave?" The question made her pause. "I didn't leave, I was sent away." "By who?" "My family. When I turned 18, they decided I needed to focus on more practical pursuits. Marriage, specifically. Traditional Chinese families don't always approve of daughters who prefer fighting to finding husbands." Alexander sensed there was much more to the story, but Maya's body language warned him not to push further. Instead, he took a different approach. "Are you hungry?" "What?" "It's 1:30 in the morning, you just finished a 10-hour shift followed by what looked like an hour of intensive training. I'm betting you haven't eaten anything substantial since lunch." "I'm fine. That wasn't the question. Are you hungry?" Maya hesitated. "Yes. I know a place, nothing fancy. Just good food and no dress code required." "Alex." "Not a date, just food. Two people who happen to be hungry at the same time, eating in the same location. No expectations, no agenda." "Why are you being so persistent?" "Because you're the first person I've met in years who challenges me to be more than just rich. You make me want to earn your respect instead of buying it." Maya looked at him for a long moment, weighing something in her mind. "One condition." "Name it." "No more questions about my past tonight. We can talk about anything else, but my personal history is off limits." "Deal." The diner Alex chose was a 24-hour place in Queens that served truck drivers, night shift workers, and insomniacs who needed comfort food at unusual hours. Maya seemed to relax as soon as they walked in. The casual atmosphere and working-class clientele apparently felt safer to her than elegant restaurants filled with people who might have expectations or judgments. They found a booth in the back corner, and Maya ordered pancakes with a side of bacon while Alex requested coffee and pie. She ate with genuine hunger, and Alex found himself fascinated by this glimpse of Maya without her professional mask. "Can I ask about Kung Fu without it counting as personal history?" he ventured. "Depends on the question." "The form you were practicing, what style was it?" "Northern Shaolin with elements of Wing Chun. My grandfather believed in combining traditional techniques with practical applications." "How many hours a day did you train?" "When I was younger, 4 to 6 hours after school, more on weekends. Training wasn't optional in our family." "Do you miss it?" Maya paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Miss what?" "Competing. From what I understand, someone with your background would have been eligible for national teams, international competition. I was never interested in competition." "Why not?" "Because Kung Fu isn't a sport. It's a way of life, a philosophy, a means of protecting yourself and others. Turning it into entertainment diminishes its purpose." Alex found himself leaning forward, drawn in by the passion in her voice. "But surely your grandfather would have been proud to see you compete at the highest levels." "My grandfather cared more about character than trophies. He used to say that the most important victories happen when nobody's watching." "Like 3 nights ago in the restaurant." Maya met his eyes directly. Exactly like 3 nights ago. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Alex noticed Maya gradually relaxing. Her shoulders lost their defensive tension, and she began to make occasional eye contact instead of constantly scanning for exits. "Your turn," she said eventually. "For what?" "To answer questions. Fair is fair." "What do you want to know?" "Why restaurants? You could have gone into any business, but you chose hospitality." "Why?" Alex considered the question seriously. "Because food brings people together. It's one of the few industries where success depends on making people genuinely happy, rather than just separating them from their money. That's surprisingly idealistic for a billionaire." "You think billionaires can't be idealistic?" "I think it's easier to be idealistic when you can afford the luxury of principles." "That's cynical even for you." Maya shrugged. "Experience teaches cynicism." "What kind of experience?" She gave him a warning look. "That counts as personal history." "Sorry, force of habit." They finished eating as the first hints of dawn began lightening the sky outside. Alex found himself reluctant to end the evening, which had been the most genuinely relaxing conversation he'd had in months. "Can I drive you home?" he offered as they stood to leave. "I can take the subway." "It's 5 a.m. and you live in Queens. Let me drive you." Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Alex's car was a modest BMW rather than the Ferrari or Lamborghini Maya had expected. She raised an eyebrow as he opened the passenger door for her. "Not what you were expecting?" "I figured you'd drive something flashier." "I save the flashy cars for when I need to intimidate people. Tonight I just want to get you home safely." During the drive to Maya's neighborhood, they talked about books, movies, and music. Neutral topics that revealed shared interests in classic literature and obscure foreign films. Alex discovered that Maya was far more widely read than her job suggested, with opinions on authors and subjects that indicated formal education well beyond high school. When they reached her building, a converted warehouse in an industrial area that was slowly gentrifying, Maya turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Thank you for dinner, and for not pushing when I asked you not to. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove I'm not completely terrible." "Jury's still out on that," Maya said, but she was smiling. "Can I see you again?" "Alex, not a date, just this. Conversation with someone who doesn't want anything from me except honesty." Maya studied his face in the dim light from the dashboard. "Why is this so important to you?" "Because you're the first person I've met who makes me want to be worthy of their respect." Something shifted in Maya's expression. A brief glimpse of vulnerability before her defenses snapped back into place. "I have to go." She was out of the car before Alex could respond, disappearing into her building without looking back. But as he drove home through the empty streets, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed between them. What he didn't know was that Maya was standing at her window, watching his taillights disappear and wondering why a man who could have anyone was so determined to understand someone who'd spent years making herself invisible. And what neither of them realized was that Marcus Webb, Alex's business partner and oldest friend, had been following them since they left the restaurant, taking photographs and making plans that would soon threaten everything they were beginning to build together. V2 mes recente copier publicar 4. Marcus Webb had been Alexander Thornfield's business partner for 8 years, best friend for 12, and secret enemy for the past 6 months. As he sat in his penthouse office reviewing the photographs his private investigator had taken of Alex and Maya, his jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. Maya Chen wasn't just some waitress who'd caught Alex's attention. She was the granddaughter of Li Wei Chen, the legendary kung fu master whose dojo Marcus had desperately tried to join as a teenager, only to be rejected for lacking the discipline and character Li Wei demanded from his students. The old man had looked right through Marcus, seeing the anger and entitlement that drove him, and had dismissed him with words that still burned 15 years later. "You seek power, not wisdom. Find another teacher." Now Li Wei's granddaughter was threatening to derail the most important business deal of Marcus's career. Webb Industries stood to make $40 million from the sale of Alex's restaurant chain to a consortium of international investors, a deal that would only proceed if Alex remained focused on business rather than getting distracted by romantic entanglements with inappropriate women. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. "It's Webb. I need you to handle a problem." The voice on the other end was cold and professional. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that requires someone to disappear for a while. Permanently, if necessary." While Marcus was making arrangements to destroy her life, Maya was experiencing something she'd thought was impossible: hope. For the first time in 4 years, she'd allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't involve hiding, running, or constantly looking over her shoulder. Working at Le Bernardin had become more than just a job since Alex started visiting regularly. He'd kept his promise not to pressure her about dates, instead finding excuses to be in the restaurant during her shifts. Sometimes he reviewed inventory reports from a corner table. Other times he met with suppliers in the dining room. Always, he treated her with the same respectful professionalism he showed his executives, never using his position to make her uncomfortable. But it was the small gestures that broke down Maya's defenses. The way he remembered she preferred Earl Grey tea over coffee during her breaks. How he'd arranged for the staff parking area to have better lighting after learning she walked to the subway alone after late shifts. The fact that he'd quietly increased security at all his properties following the restaurant robbery, not to protect himself, but to ensure his employees felt safe. Maya was cleaning tables after the lunch service when Henry approached with an expression of barely controlled fury. "Maya, I need to speak with you privately." Something in his tone made her stomach clench with familiar dread. She followed him into his office, where he closed the door and turned to face her with devastating news. "Immigration Services received an anonymous tip this morning claiming you're working under false documentation." The blood drained from Maya's face. "What?" "They're conducting a full investigation into your employment status. Legal documentation, background verification, the works. If there's anything irregular about your papers." Maya sank into a chair, her mind racing. Her documentation was legitimate, but it wouldn't survive deep scrutiny because it had been created by people who specialized in helping victims disappear from dangerous situations. Immigration investigators would eventually trace the documents back to their source, exposing not just Maya, but an entire network that helped women escape abusive families and arranged marriages. Who would do this? Henri asked gently. Maya already knew. There was only one person who had both the motivation and resources to destroy her life so thoroughly. Someone who'd been watching her closely enough to know exactly where to strike. "I have to quit," she said quietly. "Maya, no. We can fight this. Alexander has excellent lawyers. I can't involve Alex in this. If immigration connects him to my case, it could damage his businesses, his reputation. I won't let that happen." "Then what will you do?" Maya stood up, her decision made. What I've always done. Run. Henri grabbed her arm gently. You don't have to live like this. Whatever you're running from, there might be another way. You don't understand. The people I'm running from don't give up, they don't forgive, and they have enough money and connections to destroy anyone who tries to help me. That evening, Maya packed her few belongings into a single duffel bag. The same routine she'd performed in 3 different cities over the past 4 years. Leave no trace. Take nothing that couldn't be replaced, disappear before anyone realized she was gone. She was almost finished when she heard a key in the lock. Only one person had a key to her apartment. The landlord, and he'd given Maya explicit instructions never to use it except in emergencies. Maya positioned herself behind the door, ready to fight if necessary, but the person who entered was Alexander Thornfield. Maya? Henry told me what happened. We need to… Alex stopped short when he saw the packed bag on her bed. No. You shouldn't be here. You're leaving. I have to. No, you don't. We can handle this together. I have lawyers, investigators, resources. Alex, stop. Maya's voice was firm but not unkind. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. Someone is targeting you to get to me. That makes it absolutely my fight. Maya turned to face him fully, and Alex saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. This wasn't fear or uncertainty. This was the look of someone who'd made a final decision and wouldn't be swayed by arguments or emotions. You think this is about you, but it's not. This is about my past catching up with me, just like I always knew it would. What past? Maya, talk to me. Whatever this is, we can handle it. I can't tell you. Why not? Because you're a good man who believes problems can be solved with money and determination. But some problems don't have solutions. Some people can't be fought or reasoned with or bought off. Sometimes the only option is to run. Alex moved closer, his voice desperate. I'm not letting you disappear from my life because someone sent an anonymous tip to immigration. It won't stop with immigration. Maya's voice was flat, emotionless. Next, it'll be the IRS. Then it'll be criminal investigations based on planted evidence. Then it'll be threats against people I care about. It escalates until everyone around me is in danger. Who is it? Who are you so afraid of? Maya was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much truth she could safely share. My family. Your family is threatening you. My family sold me. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Alex felt his knees buckle slightly as the implications hit him. When I was 17, my parents arranged a marriage to a man I'd never met. Zhang Wei, heir to a shipping fortune, 43 years old, with a reputation for acquiring beautiful things and discarding them when he got bored. The bride price was $2 million. Alex's hands clenched into fists. Jesus Christ. I refused. My grandfather supported my decision and offered to let me stay with him, but my parents threatened to destroy his school, ruin his reputation, and have him deported if he interfered. So I agreed to meet Zhang Wei, thinking maybe I could convince him I wasn't suitable. Maya's voice became distant, as if she were recounting someone else's story. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a possession. Something beautiful and exotic to display at social functions and abuse in private. When I continued refusing, he had me kidnapped and held until the wedding. How did you escape? My grandfather's training. Zhang Wei's men underestimated what a 17-year-old girl could do when properly motivated. I fought my way out, took money from Zhang Wei's safe, and disappeared. That was 5 years ago. 4 years, 7 months, 12 days. Zhang Wei has been looking for me ever since. Not because he loves me, but because I embarrassed him. I made him look weak in front of his associates. In his world, that's unforgivable. Alex felt rage building in his chest like a physical fire. Why haven't you gone to the police? With what evidence? Zhang Wei's operation is completely legal on paper. Arranged marriages aren't illegal if both parties appear to consent. And my family would swear I was mentally unstable, that I ran away from a loving home and a generous suitor. But you're an American citizen. You have rights. I'm a Chinese-American woman with no money, no connections, and no proof of crimes that were carefully constructed to appear legal. Zhang Wei has teams of lawyers, politicians in his pocket, and enough money to make problems disappear permanently. Alex understood now why Maya had been so resistant to his interest. She wasn't playing hard to get or protecting herself from heartbreak. She was protecting herself from a genuine threat that could cost her everything, including her life. So you've been running for 4 years. New city every 18 months. New identity, new job, new life. It worked until someone figured out who I really am. Someone like Marcus Webb. Maya's head snapped up in surprise. What? My business partner. He's been acting strange lately, asking questions about you, taking calls he won't explain. I thought he was just being protective of the business, but now… Alex, you have to stay away from me. If Marcus is involved, then Zhang Wei knows exactly where I am. Coming here puts you in danger. I don't care about danger. Well, I do. Maya's composure finally cracked. I care about you getting hurt because of me. I care about your business being destroyed because you tried to help someone you barely know. I care about good people suffering because I was selfish enough to let myself care about someone again. Alex reached for her, but Maya stepped back, shaking her head. I'm leaving tonight. Don't try to find me. Don't hire investigators or use your connections. Just let me go and forget we ever met. Maya, promise me. Alex looked at her for a long moment, seeing the fear and desperation she was trying so hard to hide. I can't promise that. Then you're going to get us both killed. Maya grabbed her bag and headed for the door, but Alex blocked her path. There has to be another way. There isn't. What if we expose him? What if we go public with what he's done? With what proof? My word against his? He'll destroy me in court and come after you next. What if we make sure he can't? Something in Alex's tone made Maya look at him more carefully. What do you mean? Give me 24 hours. Don't run. Don't disappear. Give me 1 day to show you there's another option. Alex, this isn't a business problem you can solve with strategy and resources. Maybe not. But I'm not giving up on you without a fight. Maya stared at him, torn between hope and terror. Everything in her experience told her to run immediately, but something in Alex's eyes made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. 24 hours, she said finally. But if you can't find a solution that doesn't put you at risk, I'm gone. Deal. As Alex left her apartment, neither of them noticed the van parked across the street or the long-range camera capturing their every move. Marcus Webb was already implementing the next phase of his plan, and 24 hours might not be nearly enough time to save them both. Alexander Thornfield had built his business empire by being prepared for any contingency, but nothing had prepared him for the phone call that woke him at 4 a.m. Mr. Thornfield? This is Detective Martinez, NYPD. We need you to come to Bellevue Hospital immediately. Maya Chen was found unconscious in an alley in Chinatown 3 hours ago. Alex was dressed and in his car before the detective finished explaining the circumstances. Maya had been discovered by a jogger, beaten unconscious with no identification and no obvious motive for the attack. Only the emergency contact card in her wallet, which listed the restaurant, had led police to Alex. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of rage and self-recrimination. He should have insisted she stay with him. He should have provided better security. He should have recognized that 24 hours was too long when dealing with people willing to kidnap and abuse teenage girls. Detective Martinez met him in the emergency waiting room, a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd clearly seen too much violence in her career. She's stable but unconscious. Concussion, 3 broken ribs, extensive bruising. Whoever did this knew exactly how to hurt her without leaving obvious evidence of torture. Has she said anything? She hasn't regained consciousness since we found her. But Mr. Thornfield, there's something else. We found this in her jacket pocket. Martinez handed him a photograph that made his blood freeze. It showed Maya and Alex leaving the diner 4 nights earlier. But Maya's face had been circled in red ink, with a message written on the back in Chinese characters. Can you read this? Martinez asked. Alex stared at the foreign writing, feeling helpless. No, but I know someone who can. An hour later, Henri Dubois arrived at the hospital with Dr. Kim Nakamura, a linguistics professor from Columbia who specialized in Chinese dialects. Dr. Nakamura studied the photograph with growing concern. This is written in traditional Chinese, but the phrasing is archaic. Formal. It says, "The runaway bride will return to her rightful husband, or all who shelter her will suffer the same fate." Rightful husband? Detective Martinez looked confused. Alex explained Maya's situation as concisely as possible, watching Martinez's expression shift from skepticism to grim understanding. So this Jiang Wei character had her beaten as a warning? Not Jiang Wei directly, he's too smart to get his hands dirty. But his people, yes. We'll need evidence to build a case. I might be able to help with that. Everyone turned as Marcus Webb entered the waiting room, his expression perfectly crafted to convey concern and support. Alex felt his suspicion crystallize into certainty. "Marcus, how did you know to come here?" "I heard about the attack through police contacts. I came as soon as I could." "Police contacts? Alex, we need to talk. Privately." Against his better judgment, Alex followed Marcus to a quiet corner of the waiting room. Marcus glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard before speaking in low, urgent tones. "This has to stop. Now." "What has to stop?" "Your involvement with this woman. She's dangerous, Alex. She's brought violent criminals into our lives, threatened our business, and now she's putting everyone around her at risk. Maya is the victim here. Maya is a magnet for trouble. And as long as you're associated with her, that trouble becomes our trouble." Alex studied his partner's face, seeing something he'd never noticed before, a coldness that went deeper than business concerns. "You did this. What? You're the one who called immigration. You're the one who told Jiang Wei where to find her." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Alex, you're emotional right now. You're not thinking clearly. Answer the question, Marcus. Did you contact Jiang Wei?" "I contacted people who could verify whether this woman was who she claimed to be. Yes." The admission hit Alex like a physical blow. "You son of a bitch. I protected our business interests. This woman was using false documentation, lying about her background, and manipulating you into a relationship that could have destroyed everything we've built. By selling her out to the man who tried to force her into marriage. By ensuring that dangerous criminals didn't become our problem." Alex felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper now wouldn't help Maya, and it might prevent him from learning the full extent of Marcus's betrayal. "What exactly did you tell Jiang Wei?" "I told him where she was working and living. Nothing more." "And what did he offer you in return?" Marcus hesitated, and Alex knew he'd found the real motive. "Jiang Wei owns 40% of the investment consortium trying to buy our restaurant chain. He made it clear that his participation was contingent on certain obstacles being removed." "Obstacles? You mean Maya?" "I mean distractions that were preventing you from focusing on business." Alex felt the last of his illusions about his partnership and friendship with Marcus crumble into dust. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since I realized you were serious about pursuing her." "Alex, this deal represents $40 million in profit. $40 million you were willing to throw away for a woman you'd known for less than a week. So you decided to have her beaten and threatened. I decided to remind her that some situations can't be fixed with good intentions and deep pockets. I thought she'd take the hint and disappear on her own. But she didn't. No. She came to you for help, which forced more direct measures." Alex looked at the man he'd considered his closest friend for over a decade and realized he'd never really known him at all. Marcus had always been ambitious and calculating, but Alex had assumed those traits were balanced by loyalty and basic human decency. He'd been wrong. "The partnership is over. Alex, don't make emotional decisions you'll regret. The only thing I regret is trusting you." Alex's voice was deadly quiet. "You have 24 hours to remove your belongings from our offices. After that, security will escort you from the premises. You're making a mistake. Without my connections, your expansion plans will proceed without you, or they won't. Either way, you'll have no part in them." Alex turned to leave, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "This won't end here. Jiang Wei won't stop because you fired me. If anything, you've made the situation worse. Then I'll deal with Jiang Wei directly." "With what?" "Good intentions? Jiang Wei has been acquiring women like collectible art for 20 years. He has politicians, judges, and police commissioners in 3 countries on his payroll. You think your money and your American lawyers scare him? Alex pulled free of Marcus's grip. We'll find out. As Alex walked away, Marcus called after him one last time. She'll get you killed, Alex, and for what? A woman who spent 4 years lying about everything, including her name? Alex stopped. What do you mean, including her name? Marcus smiled with cold satisfaction. Maya Chen isn't her real name. She's been using false identities for so long, I doubt she remembers who she really is. The woman you think you're protecting doesn't even exist. Despite everything he'd learned about Marcus's betrayal, this final revelation hit Alex like a knife to the chest. He'd fallen in love with someone whose name he didn't even know. But as he returned to Maya's hospital room and saw her lying unconscious, her face swollen from the beating Jiang Wei's men had given her, Alex realized it didn't matter. Whatever her real name was, whatever lies she'd told to protect herself, the woman in that hospital bed was someone worth fighting for. Doctor. Nakamura was still examining the photograph when Alex returned, her expression troubled. There's something else, she said quietly. The calligraphy style is very specific. Whoever wrote this was educated in traditional Chinese schools, probably in Hong Kong or Taiwan. But there are subtle characteristics that suggest American influence. What does that mean? It means this message wasn't written by Jiang Wei or his associates in China. It was written by someone Chinese-American, someone who learned traditional writing but has been living in America for many years. Alex felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. Someone like Maya's family, possibly, or someone working for them here in the States. Detective Martinez looked up from her notes. Mr. Thornfield, we're going to need a complete list of everyone who knew about Ms. Chen's location and situation. If this Jiang Wei has people operating in New York, we need to identify them. Alex nodded, but his attention was focused on Maya, who was beginning to stir in her hospital bed. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as she recognized where she was. Alex? Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm here. They found me. I know, but you're safe now. Maya tried to sit up, wincing at the pain from her broken ribs. No one is safe. They'll keep coming until they get what they want. What if we give them something else they want more? There's nothing Jiang Wei wants more than recovering his lost face. What about $40 million? Maya looked at him in confusion, and Alex explained Marcus's betrayal and the business deal that had motivated it. As he spoke, Maya's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something approaching hope. You're talking about destroying their expansion plans. I'm talking about making it more expensive for Jiang Wei to pursue you than to let you go. Alex, these people don't think like Western businessmen. Face and reputation matter more than money. Then we attack his face and reputation. Dr. Nakamura cleared her throat. Actually, there might be a way to do both. Everyone turned to look at her, and she continued with growing excitement. Traditional Chinese marriage contracts from Jiang Wei's generation often include very specific clauses about family honor and business reputation. If Maya was contractually promised as a bride and then refused to fulfill that obligation, Jiang Wei might be legally entitled to recover not just her, but compensation for the loss of face. How does that help us? Alex asked. Because those same contracts usually include clauses about the bride's family's obligations. If Maya's parents accepted money for a marriage that was never consummated, they might be legally obligated to return that money with interest. Maya sat up straighter despite the pain. $2 million, plus 4 years of interest and penalties, which in traditional Chinese business law could easily amount to $8 or $10 million, Dr. Nakamura confirmed. Alex felt hope building in his chest. So if we can prove Maya's parents breached their contract, Jiang Wei might be more interested in recovering his money from them than pursuing Maya. Maya looked between Alex and Dr. Nakamura, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. But we'd need proof of the original agreement, documentation of the money transfer, evidence that my parents acted in bad faith, all of which might be available through legal discovery if we file the right kind of lawsuit, Detective Martinez added. For the first time in 4 years, Maya Chen began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to run anymore. But first, They would have to survive Jiang Wei's next move, which was already in motion. The confrontation came sooner than any of them expected. Jiang Wei arrived in New York 18 hours after Maya regained consciousness, bringing with him a team of lawyers, security personnel, and enough political influence to make Detective Martinez's investigation suddenly disappear from official channels. But Alexander Thornfield had spent the previous day making preparations of his own. "You requested this meeting," Jiang Wei said as he entered the private dining room of Le Bernardin. He was exactly what Alex had expected, impeccably dressed, coldly handsome, with the kind of casual arrogance that came from a lifetime of getting whatever he wanted. "I trust you have something meaningful to discuss." Alex stood to greet his guest, noting the two bodyguards who positioned themselves near the exits. "I have a business proposition. I don't conduct business with people who harbor stolen property." "Stolen property?" Alex kept his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. "You mean Maya?" "I mean my contractually obligated bride, who has been unlawfully kept from fulfilling her family's agreement." "The woman who was kidnapped and held against her will, you mean?" Jiang Wei's expression didn't change. "Different perspectives on the same situation, but I'm not here to debate ancient history. I'm here to recover what belongs to me. Maya doesn't belong to anyone. Maya Lee belongs to my household according to a legally binding contract signed by her parents and witnessed by appropriate authorities. The fact that she ran away doesn't invalidate that agreement." Alex noted the different name but filed that information away for later. "Contracts can be broken. Not this one. Too much money was exchanged. Too many reputations are at stake. Maya will return with me to San Francisco, where the delayed wedding ceremony will finally take place. And if she refuses, she won't refuse. Not after her family explains the consequences of continued disobedience." Jiang Wei gestured, and one of his associates placed a tablet on the table. The screen showed video footage of an elderly man Alex recognized as Li Wei Chen, Maya's grandfather, being led away from his dojo in handcuffs. "Immigration violations," Jiang Wei explained calmly, "discovered during a routine audit of his school's financial records. He's currently being held for deportation hearings." Alex felt his hands clench into fists. "You son of a bitch. I'm a businessman protecting my investments. Maya's grandfather will be released and all charges dropped as soon as she fulfills her obligations, if she continues to resist." Jiang Wei didn't need to finish the threat. The message was clear: comply or watch the man who'd raised her suffer the consequences. "There's another option," Alex said quietly. "I'm listening. You received $2 million from Maya's parents as part of the marriage contract. According to traditional Chinese business law, if the bride's family breaches that contract through deception or bad faith, they are obligated to return your investment with appropriate penalties." Jiang Wei's expression sharpened with interest. "Go on. Maya's parents lied to you. They claimed she was willing to marry you, but they knew she would refuse. They took your money under false pretenses, which constitutes fraud under both American and Chinese law. Even if that were true, recovering money from her parents doesn't address the matter of face. I was publicly humiliated when Maya disappeared. That requires personal compensation." Alex had anticipated this argument. What if the compensation was substantial enough to demonstrate that you were the wronged party? What if everyone involved understood that you were generous enough to release Maya from an obligation her parents had fraudulently created? How substantial? $8 million immediately, plus public acknowledgement that you were deceived by Maya's family and that your decision to release her demonstrates wisdom and compassion rather than weakness. Jiang Wei leaned back in his chair, considering the offer. $8 million was significantly more than he'd originally invested, and it would allow him to save face while eliminating a problem that had become increasingly expensive to maintain. Who would provide this compensation? I would. And in return, Maya goes free. Completely free. No further contact, no claims on her, no threats against her family. You drop the charges against her grandfather and leave all of them alone permanently. You're willing to pay $8 million for a woman you've known for less than 2 weeks? I'm willing to pay $8 million to ensure that a good person doesn't spend the rest of her life running from a situation she never chose. Jiang Wei studied Alex for a long moment, his calculating mind weighing the costs and benefits of the proposed arrangement. There would have to be documentation, legal agreements that protect both parties. Of course. And Maya would have to sign paperwork acknowledging that she was never coerced, that her refusal to marry was her own choice, not the result of outside influence. Alex hesitated. He could see the trap in Jiang Wei's demand, documentation that would shift all blame to Maya and her family while absolving Jiang Wei of any wrongdoing. She'll sign whatever's necessary, Alex said finally. Then we have an agreement. The legal paperwork took another 4 hours to complete, with teams of lawyers from both sides crafting documents that would satisfy American courts, Chinese business traditions, and Jiang Wei's need to emerge from the situation with his reputation intact. Maya signed the papers in Alex's office, her hand shaking slightly as she acknowledged that her 4-year nightmare was finally ending. Li Wei-chen was released from immigration custody before the ink was dry on the contracts. But it was the conversation that followed Jiang Wei's departure that Alex would remember most clearly. $8 million, Maya said quietly. That's more money than I'll earn in my entire lifetime. It's less than I spend on art in a good year. That's not the point, Alex. You barely know me. You know I lied about my name, my background, probably dozens of other things. Why would you risk so much for someone you can't trust? Alex sat on the edge of her hospital bed, choosing his words carefully. What's your real name? Li Mei Hua. Maya is the American name I chose when I started running. Li Mei Hua. Alex repeated slowly. It's beautiful. It means beautiful plum blossom. My grandfather said I was born during plum blossom season, when winter is ending and spring is about to begin. Is that what this is? The end of winter? Maya looked at him with eyes that held 4 years' worth of pain and hope. I don't know. I've been running for so long I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place. We could figure it out together. Alex, I don't have anything to offer you. No money, no connections, no social status. I'm a waitress with a fake identity and enough emotional baggage to fill a cargo ship. You have something worth more than all of that. What? You make me want to be worthy of you. Maya was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. You realize this is crazy, right? We've known each other for less than 2 weeks. People don't fall in love that quickly in real life. Don't they? Do they? Alex leaned closer, his voice soft but certain. I don't know about other people, I only know about us. And what do you know about us? I know that I'd rather spend one day being completely honest with you than a lifetime being fake with anyone else. I know that watching you fight those gunmen was the moment I realized I'd been sleepwalking through my life. I know that the thought of you disappearing terrifies me more than any business deal I've ever made. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes. Alex, I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt by people who were supposed to protect you. I know you have every reason not to trust someone like me. Someone like you? Someone rich, privileged, someone who's never had to fight for survival or run from anything more dangerous than a hostile takeover. Maya touched his face gently, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. You're wrong about that. About what? You think you don't understand survival, but you do. You survived having Marcus as a best friend for 12 years without letting him destroy your basic decency. You survived growing up rich without becoming entitled or cruel. You survived having everything handed to you without forgetting how to work for something that mattered. Like what? Like this, like us. Alex captured her hand and held it against his cheek. Is there an us? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Even though I'm completely crazy for falling in love with someone I met 2 weeks ago, especially because you're completely crazy for falling in love with someone you met 2 weeks ago. Alex leaned down and kissed her softly, and Maya felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for 4 years finally begin to thaw. When they broke apart, she was smiling despite the tears streaming down her face. So what happens now? She asked. Now you recover from your injuries. Then you quit your job as a waitress. I need to work, Alex. I can't let you support me. I'm not talking about supporting you, I'm talking about offering you a position that matches your actual qualifications. Maya looked confused. What qualifications? Alex smiled. Henri told me you speak 4 languages fluently, have sommelier-level wine knowledge, and understand fine dining service better than people who've been in the industry for decades. I'm expanding into international markets next year. I need someone who can handle cultural complexities and high-stakes negotiations. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career if you want it. Maya stared at him in amazement. You're serious. Completely serious. Though I should warn you, the position comes with some unusual requirements, such as the person in this role would need to attend a lot of business dinners, travel frequently, and occasionally accompany the CEO to social functions. That sounds suspiciously like dating. Dating with excellent health insurance and a 6-figure salary. Maya laughed despite herself. You're ridiculous. I'm practical. I need someone I can trust in that position, and I'd like to spend more time with the woman I'm in love with. This solves both problems. What if it doesn't work out between us? Then you'll still have a career you're qualified for, and a reference that will open doors anywhere in the hospitality industry. Maya considered the offer, hardly able to believe her life was changing so dramatically. I have one condition. Name it. I want to visit my grandfather before I make any major decisions. I need to talk to him about what happened, make sure he's really safe. Of course, we'll fly to San Francisco tomorrow. We? I'm not letting you out of my sight until I'm absolutely certain Zhang Wei honors his agreement. Maya smiled. That could take a while. I'm hoping it takes forever. Li Wei Chen was waiting for them at the small airport outside San Francisco, looking older than Maya remembered, but unmistakably her grandfather. When he saw her walking toward him with Alex, his weathered face broke into the first genuine smile Maya had seen from him in years. Mei Hua, he said softly, using her real name as he embraced her. You look like yourself again. What do you mean? For 4 years you've been carrying the weight of other people's choices. Now you move like someone who's remembered she has choices of her own. Maya introduced Alex, who bowed respectfully and addressed Li Wei in carefully practiced Mandarin. The old master smiled at the effort and responded in English. Your pronunciation needs work, but your intentions are clear. You care for my granddaughter. Very much, sir. Good. She deserves someone who sees her value. Li Wei looked between them with knowing eyes. The winter is ending, Mei Hua. Are you ready for spring? Maya looked at Alex, who was trying to follow the conversation despite the language barrier, and felt the last of her defenses finally crumble. Yes, grandfather, I think I am. 6 months later, Maya Chen, officially Li Mei Hua Thornfield after their quiet courthouse wedding, stood in the kitchen of their newest restaurant in Hong Kong, coordinating with chefs who spoke 3 different dialects of Chinese and marveling at how dramatically her life had changed. Alex found her there as the evening service wound down, reviewing inventory reports that most people would have delegated to assistants. Any regrets? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. About what? Marrying a man who thinks he can solve every problem with money and determination. Maya leaned back against his chest, smiling. That depends. Any regrets about marrying a woman who can take down armed robbers but still checks the locks twice before going to sleep? Not even one. Good. Because I'm told this job comes with some unusual requirements. Such as? The person in this role needs to attend a lot of business dinners, travel frequently, and occasionally kiss the CEO when he's being particularly charming. Alex turned her around in his arms, grinning. That does sound challenging. I'm up for it if you are. Mrs. Thornfield, I thought you'd never ask. As Alex kissed his wife in the kitchen of their Hong Kong restaurant, both of them remembered that sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unlikely meetings, survive the most impossible obstacles, and end up exactly where they belong.
The sound of tearing silk echoed through the hushed ballroom, sharper than a gunshot. All eyes snapped towards the source, Bianca Vance, her face a mask of cruel triumph, holding a shredded piece of emerald fabric. Before her stood a simple waitress, her uniform now hanging in tatters, exposing the delicate skin of her shoulder. That's what you get for bumping into me, trash, Bianca hissed, her voice dripping with venom. The waitress didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She simply met Bianca's gaze with an unnervingly calm fire in her eyes. The crowd murmured, unaware they were witnessing the spark that would ignite an empire's war. They saw a waitress being humiliated, but they had no idea she was Anya Sterling, and that her husband, the most powerful and ruthless man in the city, was watching from the shadows. The Valerius Grand Hotel's ballroom was a galaxy of artificial stars. Crystals dripped from the ceiling in shimmering chandeliers, casting a fractured diamond-like glow upon the city's elite. It was the annual Starlight Foundation Charity Gala, an event where fortunes were pledged on champagne-fueled whims and reputations were made or shattered between the amuse-bouche and the dessert course. Men in bespoke Tom Ford tuxedos, their wrists heavy with Patek Philippe watches, navigated the throngs of women poured into couture gowns that cost more than a suburban home. It was a jungle of silk and ambition, and tonight Anya Petrova was merely part of the scenery. Her uniform was a crisp black tailor-made dress, simple but elegant, a stark contrast to the peacocking finery around her. A small discreet earpiece was tucked behind her ear, her only link to the security detail she had insisted on leaving outside the main hall. To everyone here, she was just one of the dozens of catering staff hired for the evening, efficient, silent, and utterly invisible. And that was precisely how she wanted it. From her vantage point, near a towering floral arrangement of white orchids and hydrangeas, she had a clear view of the main dais. Her eyes, a unique shade of stormy grey, missed nothing. She tracked the subtle shifts in power, the whispered deals masked by polite smiles, the predatory glint in the eyes of corporate raiders circling their next target. This world was a game, one she knew how to play better than most, even from the sidelines. Her gaze eventually settled on a couple holding court near the center of the room. Damien Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Innovations, was a man who wore his ambition like a second skin. He had a classic, camera-ready charm, a sharp jawline, perfectly coiffed dark hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was the golden boy of the tech world, his company's recent IPO, making him the city's newest, most talked-about magnate. Clinging to his arm, practically dripping in Cartier diamonds, was Bianca Vance. Bianca was the daughter of media mogul Robert Vance, and she moved with the entitled grace of someone who had never been told no in her life. Her gown was a fiery red Marchesa creation that demanded attention, its fabric shimmering under the lights as she laughed a tinkling artificial sound. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was a hardness in her sapphire eyes, a perpetual sneer playing on her perfectly painted lips that marred the image. Anya had been observing them for the better part of an hour. Damien was her husband's younger cousin, the festering wound in the Sterling family's side. The two branches of the family had been locked in a cold war for decades, ever since Damien's father had tried to stage a hostile takeover of the main family business, Sterling Enterprises. He had failed spectacularly, banished from the core empire, and left with a modest tech startup as a consolation prize. Damien had inherited that startup and his father's burning resentment, clawing his way back into the spotlight with a relentless, single-minded focus. Another glass of the Haut Dom Perignon. Bianca snapped her fingers, clicking impatiently in the air without even bothering to look at the waitress who approached her. Anya kept her expression neutral, her movements fluid and professional, as she picked up an empty flute from Bianca's table. Right away, Madame Anya said, her voice soft and even. Bianca finally turned her head, her eyes narrowing, as she took in Anya's face. It was a fleeting, dismissive glance, the kind one gives to furniture. Yet for a split second, something flickered in Bianca's expression, a primal female assessment. Anya was not conventionally beautiful in the way Bianca was. Her features were stronger, her cheekbones high and sharp, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, simple knot. But there was a poise to her, an innate confidence in her posture that no uniform could hide. She was a still lake in a room full of crashing waves, and it was unsettling. "You're new," Bianca stated not as a question, but as an accusation. "I don't recognize you. I was hired by the hotel for the event," Madame Anya replied, calmly refusing to be baited. Damien, ever the politician, gave Anya a cursory, charming smile. "Bianca, darling, let's not trouble the staff. We should go say hello to Mr. Blackwood." He placed a hand on the small of Bianca's back, but she shrugged it off, her eyes still fixed on Anya. "See that you're quicker this time," Bianca said, turning her back with a dismissive flick of her wrist. The insult was clear. "You are beneath my notice, but your service is still unsatisfactory." Anya retreated towards the bar, her composure a perfect, impenetrable mask. She wasn't angry. Bianca Vance was a gnat, a minor annoyance. This job, this disguise, was a necessity. Her husband, Adrian Sterling, was a man who collected enemies as easily as other billionaires collected art. He was a phantom, a whisper in boardrooms, a man whose true face was known to very few. His power was absolute, but silent. To protect him, and to protect herself, Anya had cultivated a life of near anonymity. Their marriage, a quiet ceremony, performed by a justice of the peace 2 years ago, was their most closely guarded secret. Tonight, Adrian was supposed to be in Zurich, finalizing a deal that would cripple one of his biggest rivals. Anya had taken the catering job as a way to observe Damien. Adrian had heard whispers that his cousin was getting reckless, making promises to dangerous investors that he couldn't possibly keep. Anya's sharp eye for detail and her ability to blend in made her the perfect reconnaissance tool. She could gather information unfiltered by the sycophants and yes-men who surrounded people like Damien. She returned with the champagne, placing it on the table with a steady hand. Bianca ignored her completely, now engrossed in a conversation with a portly man in finance. Anya began to move away, her mission for the moment complete. She had seen the desperation behind Damien's confident facade, the way his eyes darted around the room, constantly searching, constantly calculating. He was in over his head. That was the information she needed. As she turned to navigate through a cluster of guests, her path was suddenly blocked. Bianca Vance stood before her, her expression petulant. "Excuse me, madam," Anya said, attempting to sidestep. "You think you can just walk away when I'm talking to you?" Bianca's voice was low, but it carried an edge of steel. In reality, Bianca hadn't been talking to her at all. Anya paused, confused. "My apologies." "I thought you were finished." "I'm finished when I say I'm finished," Bianca sneered. "I was watching you. You've been staring at my fiancé all night." The accusation was so absurd that Anya almost broke character. She had been watching Damien, yes, but as a target, not an object of desire. To Bianca, however, every woman was a potential rival, every glance a challenge to her sovereignty. "I assure you, madam, I was only doing my job," Anya said, her voice remaining placid. "Your job is to be invisible, not to ogle the guests." Bianca took a deliberate step closer, invading Anya's personal space. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's joy, was cloying and overwhelming. "I know your type. You see a man with money, and you think you can bat your eyelashes and work your way into his bed. Let me tell you something. Damien is mine. A little gutter rat like you wouldn't even be a momentary distraction." The entire exchange was happening in a bubble of perceived privacy, shielded by the noise of the gala. But people were starting to notice. The conversation around them lulled slightly. Damien, seeing the brewing confrontation, began to move toward them, a look of weary annoyance on his face. He knew Bianca's temper. "Bianca, come on," he said, trying to take her arm. "You're making a scene." She started it. Bianca snapped, yanking her arm away. Her eyes, wild and furious, darted back to Anya. She needed a target for her misplaced insecurity, and the silent, composed waitress was the perfect one. You think you're better than me, don't you, with your quiet little judgments? Before Anya could respond, before Damien could intervene, Bianca's hand shot out. It wasn't a slap. It was something more deliberate, more humiliating. Her manicured fingers adorned with a massive sapphire ring hooked into the neckline of Anya's simple emerald dress, the dress she'd worn under her uniform for a quick change later. The fabric was delicate silk, a private indulgence. With a vicious tug, Bianca ripped it downwards. The sound was shockingly loud in the relative quiet that had fallen around them, a sharp, grating rip that sliced through the murmurs of the gala. For a frozen moment, no one moved. The torn emerald silk gaped open, exposing Anya's collarbone and the top of her shoulder in a jagged line. The uniform jacket she'd been wearing was now pulled askew, the damage beneath it stark and violent. It was an act of such calculated cruelty, designed for maximum humiliation. It wasn't just an attack on a waitress. It was a branding, a public declaration of status. I can destroy you, and you are powerless to stop me. Bianca Vance stood back, her chest heaving slightly, a triumphant, ugly smirk on her face. She held up the torn scrap of fabric like a trophy. There she said, her voice ringing with satisfaction. Now your dress looks as cheap as you are. A collective gasp went through the nearest onlookers. This was beyond the pale, even for the cutthroat world of the city's elite. Damien's face went from annoyed to horrified. This wasn't just a scene. It was a potential PR catastrophe. He grabbed Bianca's arm this time with force. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he hissed, his voice a low, furious whisper. But Anya didn't look at him. She didn't look at the shocked faces in the crowd or the pitying glances from the other staff members who were frozen in place, terrified of being drawn into the fray. She didn't even look at the ruined fabric of her dress. Her stormy grey eyes were locked on Bianca. There was no fear in them. No tears, no shame, no anger. There was only a profound, chilling calm. It was the calm of a dormant volcano, a placid surface hiding an immense, molten core of power. She didn't flinch. She didn't scramble to cover herself. She simply stood there, her posture perfect, her gaze unwavering, and let Bianca's pathetic victory hang in the air and rot. This unnerving composure seemed to infuriate Bianca more than any outburst would have. She had expected hysterics, a satisfying crumble. The waitress's stoicism was an act of defiance. "What's the matter?" Bianca taunted, her voice rising. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you too stupid to even realize what just happened? Go on, run to your manager. Cry. See what happens. I'll have you fired before you can even file a complaint. I'll make sure you never work in this city again, not even as a dishwasher." Anya finally moved. With slow, deliberate grace, she reached up and gently took the shredded piece of silk from Bianca's fingers. Bianca was so surprised by the move that she let it go. Anya looked down at the fabric in her hand, her expression unreadable. The dress had been a gift from Adrian, custom-made by a small, independent designer in Milan she admired. It was one of her favorites. A quiet pang of sadness went through her, but she walled it off. It was just a thing. Things could be replaced. Dignity once lost was much harder to recover. She folded the small piece of silk, neatly, her movements precise and unhurried. Then she tucked it into the pocket of her apron. Finally, she looked back at Bianca, and for the first time, she spoke in a voice that was no longer soft and subservient. It was clear, measured, and resonated with an authority that was utterly out of place for a waitress. "You are making a very serious mistake," Anya said. The shift in her tone was so abrupt, so complete, that it startled everyone who heard it. The deference was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of a physicist explaining the law of gravity. Damien felt a sudden, inexplicable chill run down his spine. He looked at the waitress, really looked at her for the first time. The uniform, the serving tray, the quiet demeanor. It was all a costume. Beneath it there was something else, something formidable. He didn't know what it was, but his instincts, honed in treacherous boardrooms, were screaming at him that Bianca had just kicked a hornet's nest the size of a skyscraper. A mistake. Bianca laughed, a shrill, brittle sound. "Threatening me? Oh, this is rich. Do you have any idea who I am? I know exactly who you are." "Bianca Vance," Anya replied, her voice still level. "You are the daughter of Robert Vance. You have a trust fund valued at approximately $90 million, a media degree from a university your father endowed, and a reputation for being volatile and cruel. Your greatest accomplishment to date is being photographed at events like this one." The detailed clinical recitation stunned Bianca into silence. The crowd murmured their interest, now fully piqued. This was no longer just a socialite bullying a server. This was something else entirely. "How do you know that?" Bianca stammered, her bravado faltering. Anya gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "That's not the important question," she said. "The important question is, do you have any idea who I am?" Before Bianca could formulate a suitably scathing reply, a new voice cut through the tension. It was deep quiet and carried an unmistakable weight of command that silenced the entire ballroom instantly. "I believe that's an excellent question." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. A man was approaching, walking with an unhurried, predatory grace. He wasn't as overtly handsome as Damien. His features were sharper, more severe. He was taller, dressed in a flawless, custom-tailored dark charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his stark white shirt undone. He wore no ostentatious jewelry, only a simple, elegant watch with a black leather strap. But power radiated from him, like heat from a furnace. He was the center of gravity in any room he entered, and right now the entire ballroom was caught in his orbit. Anya's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something relief, annoyance, love passed through her eyes. Damien Sterling's face went bone white. His blood ran cold. Of all the people who could have witnessed this debacle, it had to be him. Adrian Damien choked out his voice, barely a whisper. The man Adrian Sterling didn't even glance at his cousin. His eyes, the color of cold steel, were fixed on Bianca Vance. And then they moved to Anya, taking in the torn dress, her exposed shoulder, and her unshakable composure. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Adrian Sterling, the reclusive, almost mythical head of the vast Sterling enterprises, the man they called the Shadow King of Wall Street, had just entered the game, and he looked absolutely furious. Adrian Sterling's presence changed the very atmosphere of the room. The background chatter ceased completely. The string quartet faltered into silence, and the air crackled with a new, dangerous energy. He was a man who rarely made public appearances, preferring to pull the strings of his global empire from the seclusion of his penthouse office. To see him here at an event he would typically disdain as frivolous was a shock. To see him striding into the center of a tawdry confrontation was utterly unthinkable. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze a physical force. It swept over Bianca, and she visibly withered under its intensity. The sneering, confident socialite was gone, replaced by a frightened girl who suddenly understood she had wandered into a lion's den. His eyes then shifted to Damien, and the look he gave his cousin was one of pure, undiluted contempt. It was a look that said, "You are an embarrassment to my name." Damien swallowed hard, his face pale and slick with a sudden sweat. "Adrian," he repeated, trying to inject some confidence into his voice and failing miserably. We didn't expect to see you here." Clearly, Adrian replied, his voice a low baritone that was both smooth and menacing. He still hadn't looked at Anya directly, but his entire posture was protective, his body angled slightly, as if to shield her from the others. I was under the impression this was a charity event, a place for philanthropy, not for public displays of barbarism. Every word was precise, clipped and lethal. He turned his steely gaze back to Bianca, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "You," he said the single word, cracking like a whip. "You tore her dress." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Bianca opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failed her. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, so seismically, that her entire worldview had been shattered in the span of 30 seconds. This man wasn't someone she could intimidate, not someone her father's name could influence. This was a different level of power altogether, a primal, absolute authority she had never encountered before. It was an accident. She finally managed to stammer the lie, flimsy and pathetic even to her own ears. Adrian's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. It was a chilling, predatory expression. "An accident," he repeated softly. "You accidentally hooked your fingers into her neckline and accidentally ripped it open. An impressive lack of motor control. Perhaps you should see a doctor." A few nervous titters rippled through the onlookers. The humiliation was exquisite, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Damien, seeing Bianca flounder, felt a desperate need to regain control. This was his event, his moment in the spotlight, and his cousin was hijacking it, turning it into a public execution. "Look, Adrian," he started, stepping forward. "This is just a misunderstanding. The waitress was being rude and Bianca, she overreacted. It's been handled. There's no need for you to get involved." Adrian finally turned his head to look at Damien properly. The sheer force of his focus made Damien take an involuntary step back. "Involved, Adrian," said his voice, dangerously soft. "You seem to be under the misapprehension that this is your affair to handle. You are also under the misapprehension that you are in any position to tell me what I should or should not do." He took a step closer to his cousin. "Let me correct both of those errors. Everything that happens to this woman," he gestured almost imperceptibly towards Anya, "involves me. And you, little cousin, will never be in a position to tell me anything." The possessive, definitive statement hung in the air, sparking a wildfire of speculation. Who was this waitress? Why would Adrian Sterling, a man who commanded armies of lawyers and executives, personally intervene for a member of the catering staff? The whispers started quiet and frantic. Was she a former employee, a distant relative, a secret informant? No one could fathom the truth. Anya, meanwhile, remained silent. She watched Adrian, a complicated mix of emotions swirling within her. She was frustrated that he had blown his cover. Their anonymity was their shield. But she was also undeniably moved by his immediate, unequivocal defense of her. He hadn't asked what happened. He hadn't waited for an explanation. He had seen her in distress and had come to her consequences. Be damned. She finally met his eyes, and in that silent, fleeting glance, a whole conversation passed between them. "Are you all right?" his eyes asked. "I'm fine," hers answered. "But you shouldn't be here." Too late, his gaze seemed to say, with a hint of grim satisfaction. Adrian turned his attention back to the mess at hand. His eyes fell on the torn dress again, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. He shrugged off his suit jacket, the movement fluid and elegant. The jacket was a masterpiece of tailoring worth more than most people's cars. He walked over to Anya, and with a gentleness that stunned the onlookers, draped it over her shoulders. It was far too large for her, but the gesture was so tender, so intimate, that it sent a fresh wave of shock through the ballroom. He was covering her, protecting her, claiming her in a way that was more powerful than any words. The jacket smelled of him, a clean, subtle scent of bergamot and cedarwood. It was a familiar comfort, an anchor in the storm. Anya pulled it tighter around herself, the expensive wool warm against her skin. Mr. Blackwood Adrian's voice boomed, summoning the flustered event organizer who had been hovering helplessly on the sidelines. A portly, balding man scurried forward, his face beaded with sweat. "Mr. Sterling, an honor." "Is there a problem?" "There is," Adrian said coolly. "My associate," he chose the word, "carefully has been assaulted by one of your guests. Her clothing has been destroyed. I trust the Valerius Grand Hotel has a protocol for such things. I also trust you have excellent security cameras." Blackwood's eyes widened in terror. A lawsuit from Adrian Sterling would not just bankrupt the hotel, it would erase it from the map. "Yes, of course, Mr. Sterling. Absolutely. We will handle everything. The police should be called immediately." "No police," Adrian commanded, his voice dropping again. "This will not be a media circus. This will be handled privately." "But it will be handled. As for your guests," his eyes sliced back to Damien and Bianca, "I believe they were just leaving." Damien's jaw dropped. "Leaving? We're not leaving. I'm a platinum sponsor of this event." Where Adrian corrected him, a chilling finality in his tone. "Your sponsorship is no longer required, nor is your presence. Get out." It was the ultimate power play. In his own world, Damien Sterling was a king. He graced magazine covers and rang the opening bell at the stock exchange. But in Adrian's world he was nothing, a gnat to be swatted away. Humiliation burned in Damien's cheeks. He was being thrown out of his own party in front of his investors and peers by the man he hated most in the world. And all because his girlfriend had decided to bully a waitress. A waitress who, for some terrifying and unknown reason, was under the personal protection of the Shadow King. Bianca, finally seeming to grasp the magnitude of her blunder, grabbed Damien's arm. "Damien, let's just go," she whispered, her voice trembling. But Damien was trapped. To leave was to admit defeat, to crawl away with his tail between his legs. To stay was to defy Adrian Sterling, a man who had financially ruined nations for lesser insults. As he stood there, paralyzed by indecision, Adrian delivered the final devastating blow. He turned to Anya, his expression softening, almost imperceptibly, as he looked at her. "Are you ready to go home, darling?" he asked. The word darling dropped into the silence like a perfectly cut diamond. It was intimate, affectionate, and utterly unambiguous. It shattered every theory the crowd had been entertaining. She wasn't an employee. She wasn't an associate. Anya met his gaze and allowed a small, genuine smile to touch her lips for the first time that night. "Yes, Adrian," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am." Adrian offered her his arm. Anya slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, leaving the oversized suit jacket draped over her shoulders. Together they turned their backs on the stunned couple and the speechless crowd, and began to walk towards the exit, an undisputed king and his mysterious queen leaving a battlefield of their making. The revelation was about to come, and it would be more explosive than anyone could possibly imagine. As Adrian and Anya walked away, a tidal wave of whispers erupted in their wake. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so outlandish, so impossible, that no one dared to voice it aloud. The powerful, reclusive Adrian Sterling, a man rumored to be married only to his work and a common waitress. It made no sense. Yet the evidence was irrefutable, the raw fury in his eyes, the gentle way he covered her with his jacket, the casual possessive endearment, darling. Damien Sterling stood frozen, his mind racing. He felt a cold dread creeping up his spine, a primal fear he hadn't felt since he was a child facing his father's wrath. He stared at the back of the waitress, now cloaked in his cousin's $1,000 jacket, walking with a poise that belonged in a royal court, not a hotel kitchen. Who is she? The question hammered in his skull. Bianca was the one who broke the spell. Her mind, unable to process the power shift, defaulted to its usual setting, arrogant denial. "Where do you think you're going?" She shrieked, her voice high and ragged. "You can't just walk away. That waitress works for the hotel. She needs to be fired." Security, her hysterical cries, only served to highlight her complete loss of control. A few guests exchanged looks of pity and disgust. She was a queen deposed, still shouting orders from a throne that had turned to dust beneath her. Adrian and Anya stopped just short of the grand ballroom doors. They didn't turn around. Adrian didn't even deign to look back. He simply paused, a silent final act of dominance, allowing the weight of Bianca's desperation to hang in the air and suffocate her. It was Anya who turned. She pivoted slowly, her movements fluid and deliberate. The oversized jacket slipped slightly, revealing the torn emerald silk one last time. Her face was serene, but her stormy grey eyes were alight with a cold, bright fire. She looked past the gawking crowd, past a shell-shocked Damien, and settled her gaze directly on Bianca. "He's right, Bianca," Anya said, her voice carrying across the silent room, amplified by the perfect acoustics. "You were asking the wrong question. You asked if I knew who you are." "I do. You asked if I had any idea who he is." She gestured with her head toward Adrian. "I do. But the question you failed to ask, the one you should have started with, is, who am I?" She let the question linger, a final test. Bianca just stared back, her mouth agape comprehension, still stubbornly refusing to dawn. Anya's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "You see, you assaulted a member of the catering staff. You destroyed her property. But you didn't do it in a vacuum. You did it at the Starlight Foundation Gala, an event which, for the last 5 years, has been the single largest beneficiary of the Sterling Family Philanthropic Trust." A new wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. The Sterling Trust was legendary, its endowments vast, and its influence immeasurable. And that trust, Anya continued, her voice gaining strength with every word, is managed by its chairwoman, a woman who prefers to remain anonymous, a woman who occasionally likes to work at these events to see firsthand where the money goes, and to ensure the organizations we support are running smoothly. Damien's heart stopped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly shade of white. He felt the floor drop out from under him. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. He knew the chairwoman of the trust was a closely guarded secret, known only as A.P. Sterling. He'd always assumed it was some elderly aunt, a holdover from a previous generation. Anya took a half-step forward, her presence suddenly immense. "You ripped my dress, Bianca. You called me trash. You threatened my livelihood." She paused, letting each accusation land with the force of a physical blow. "You did all of this in front of my husband." With that final explosive word, she turned back and placed her hand on Adrian's arm. Husband. The word detonated in the ballroom. The shock was palpable, a physical jolt that ran through every single person present. All the whispers, all the speculation, crystallized into a single, mind-bending truth. This wasn't a mistress or a secret employee. This was his wife. The invisible waitress was Anya Petrova Sterling, the lady of the Sterling Empire, the secret queen to the Shadow King. Bianca Vance made a small, choking sound. Her perfectly made-up face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She hadn't just insulted a waitress. She had assaulted the wife of the most dangerous man in their world. She had committed social, professional, and financial suicide in one spectacular hubristic act. Damien felt like he was going to be physically sick. The full scope of the catastrophe crashed down on him. This wasn't just a family embarrassment. Adrian hated him. Adrian had been looking for a reason, any reason, to crush him and his fledgling company. And Bianca, in her infinite arrogant stupidity, had just handed him a declaration of war on a silver platter. She hadn't just ripped a dress. She had torn a hole in the hull of Sterling Innovations, and they were sinking fast. "Oh my God," someone whispered from the crowd. "That's Anya Sterling." The name, spoken aloud for the first time, seemed to take on a life of its own. Adrian finally turned his head, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He surveyed the wreckage of his cousin's reputation, his cold eyes missing nothing. He looked at the terrified faces of investors who had backed Damien, now realizing they had bet on the wrong horse. He looked at the gossips and social climbers already composing the story they would dine out on for the next year. Then his gaze fell on Damien. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The message was crystal clear. "This is the beginning. I will ruin you for this. I will take everything from you, and I will enjoy every second of it." He turned back to Anya, his expression softening once more. "Let's go home, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice laced with a deep, resonating pride. He guided her out of the ballroom, the crowd parting for them in a wave of awed, terrified silence. The grand doors swung shut behind them, leaving a tableau of devastation. Bianca Vance finally succumbed, her legs giving way, as she crumpled to the floor in a heap of red marchesa and ruined ambition sobbing hysterically. Damien Sterling didn't go to her. He stood rooted to the spot, his champagne glass slipping from his nerveless fingers and shattering on the marble floor. The sound barely registered over the roaring in his ears. It was the sound of his entire world, everything he had worked for, everything he had built, breaking into a million irreparable pieces. The Shadow King had come into the light, and his first act was to declare war. Damien knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that it was a war he could never win. The ride home was silent. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white as the custom bulletproof Bentley sedan glided through the streets. Anya leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly draining away, leaving a profound weariness in its place. The heavy wool of his jacket was a comforting weight. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the car, the chaos of the ballroom felt a world away. Adrian had one arm wrapped around her, his hand gently stroking her hair. He hadn't said anything since they'd left the hotel, his silence more comforting than any platitude. He was simply there, a solid, unshakable presence. "I'm sorry," Anya finally said, her voice a murmur against his chest. "I know this is exactly the kind of exposure you've always avoided." Adrian tightened his grip slightly. "Don't apologize," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Don't you ever apologize for what she did to you, or for what I did in response. My only regret is that I wasn't there sooner." His hand clenched into a fist for a moment before he consciously relaxed it. "When I saw her hand on you, I saw red Anya. All I could think about was tearing him and his entire world down." "You shouldn't have come," she said, though her heart warmed at his words. "I had it under control." He chuckled a rare, soft sound. "Oh, I have no doubt you did. I saw your face. You were about to dismantle her piece by piece without raising your voice. It's one of the things I love about you." But he tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his intense gaze. "You shouldn't have to. You are my wife. No one will ever lay a hand on you and get away with it. Not on my watch. The secret of their marriage had been a mutual decision born of necessity. Adrian's life was a minefield. His business dealings were aggressive and ruthless, earning him powerful enemies across the globe. Anonymity was his armor, and by extension, Anya's. She was his one vulnerability, the single pressure point his enemies could exploit. By living a quiet, unassuming life, she was not just safe. She was his hidden strength. Anya herself was no stranger to a life in the shadows. She was the daughter of a brilliant but disgraced Russian economist who had defected to the States with nothing but the clothes on his back. She'd grown up valuing intellect and resilience over wealth and status. She'd put herself through school earning degrees in finance and art history, and had met Adrian not at a gala, but in a dusty university library, where they were both researching the same obscure 17th century financial bubble. He was drawn to her sharp mind and her utter lack of interest in his name or his fortune. She was drawn to the quiet, brilliant man beneath the intimidating reputation. Their bond was forged in whispered intellectual debates and shared ambitions far from the prying eyes of the world. "This will complicate things," Anya said, thinking of the Sterling Trust and her anonymous work there. "It will be harder to operate now. We'll adapt," Adrian said simply. "Perhaps it's for the best. I'm tired of hiding you, Anya. I'm tired of not being able to show the world the brilliant, incredible woman I married." The animosity with Damien's side of the family ran deep. It wasn't just business. It was blood. Adrian's grandfather had built Sterling Enterprises from the ground up. He had two sons, Adrian's father, Richard, who was a visionary like him, and Damien's father, Edward, who was reckless and greedy. When the patriarch died, he left the company to Richard, giving Edward a generous but non-controlling stake. Edward, consumed by jealousy, saw this as an unforgivable slight. He spent years trying to undermine his brother, culminating in a disastrous, hostile takeover attempt funded by shady offshore lenders. The attempt failed, but it nearly destroyed the company. In the fallout, Richard, a man with a heart condition, suffered a fatal stroke. Adrian, then only 22, was forced to step in. He not only saved Sterling Enterprises, but built it into a global behemoth far beyond what his father or grandfather had ever imagined. He did it with a cold, surgical precision, cutting his Uncle Edward out of the family, and the business entirely leaving him, with only the small tech company that would one day become Sterling Innovations. Adrian never forgave his uncle for his father's death, and he saw that same reckless, entitled greed in Damien. He'd allowed his cousin to operate to build his own little empire as long as he stayed out of his way. But tonight, Damien hadn't just crossed a line. He had allowed his fiancée to attack the one person Adrian held sacred. For that, there would be no forgiveness. The car pulled into the private underground garage of their penthouse. As they stepped out, Adrian's head of security, a stoic man named Carter, approached them. Sir Madam Carter said with a respectful nod. "The initial fallout report is coming in. The story is already breaking on social media. The Waitress was a Sterling. It's the #1 trending topic globally." Adrian nodded, as expected. "What's the status of Vance Media?" "Their stock is already down 7% in after-hours trading on the Asian markets," Carter reported. "Your statement disavowing any future dealings with them has had the desired effect. Robert Vance has been trying to reach you. He's called 12 times in the last hour." "Let him sweat," Adrian said coldly. "And Sterling Innovations, panic," Carter said with a grim smile. "Their primary investors, the Jensen Group, and a consortium led by Kenji Tanaka, have both scheduled emergency calls with Damien Sterling for the morning. Our sources say they are looking for an exit clause. They know that a war with Sterling Enterprises is unwinnable." Anya listened, a familiar sense of awe and trepidation washing over her. When Adrian moved, he moved entire mountains. He wasn't just going after Damien. He was systematically dismantling the entire infrastructure that held his cousin's company aloft. They entered the private elevator that opened directly into their apartment. The penthouse was a testament to their shared tastes, vast, minimalist spaces, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city, and a collection of priceless art that was both modern and classic. Anya slipped off Adrian's jacket and laid it carefully on a chair. The torn emerald dress felt like a relic from another life. "I'm going to change," she said. When she returned, dressed in simple silk pajamas, Adrian was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring down at the glittering city below. He looked like a king surveying his domain. "He'll lose everything," Anya said, softly, coming to stand beside him. "Yes," Adrian said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "He will. He will lose his company, his investors, his reputation. That woman will leave him the second the money dries up. He will be exactly where his father was 30 years ago, with nothing." "Is that what you want?" she asked, searching his profile. He was silent for a long moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "What I want," he said, finally turning to face her, his eyes dark and intense, "is for him to understand that there are consequences. He grew up believing the world would bend to his will. His father taught him that. They thought my father was weak. They thought they could take what wasn't theirs. They disrespected our family, our legacy. And tonight, he stood by and watched while his pet viper attacked my wife. He showed the same cowardice, the same weakness of character that his father did. He reached out and gently traced the line of her collarbone, his touch feather-light over the skin that had been exposed by the torn dress. This isn't about business anymore, Anya. This is about honor. He dishonored you, and for that, his entire world must burn." Anya saw the old pain in his eyes, the pain of a young man who had lost his father too soon, who had been forced to become a warrior to protect his family's legacy. Tonight hadn't created a war. It had simply fired the first shot in a war that had been brewing for a generation. She placed her hand over his. "Then we'll see it through," she said, her voice firm. "Together." Adrian's gaze softened. He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, possessive kiss filled with all the anger, fear, and love of the night. In that moment, they were not the Shadow King and his secret queen. They were just a husband and wife standing together against the world, ready for the storm they had unleashed. The dawn broke over the city, but for Damien Sterling and Bianca Vance, the world remained dark. The aftermath of the gala was not a slow burn, it was an inferno. By the time the sun was fully up, their names were toxic. The video, surreptitiously filmed by a dozen different guests on their phones, had gone viral. Every angle was covered. Bianca's sneering face, the shocking sound of ripping silk, Anya's unnerving calm, and the terrifying silent arrival of Adrian Sterling. The narrative was set in stone, a cruel, entitled socialite, and her weak-willed fiancé had publicly attacked a powerful, beloved philanthropist who was working incognito. Anya, the secret Sterling, was an instant folk hero. Bianca was the villain in a real-life fairy tale, and the public was screaming for her head. Bianca's world imploded first. By 7 a.m., she had been dropped by her modeling agency. By 8 a.m., 3 major brands, for which she was a paid ambassador, had publicly terminated her contracts, issuing statements condemning bullying and harassment. Her father, Robert Vance, a man who prided himself on his media savvy, was in full-blown panic mode. Vance Media's stock had plummeted overnight, Advertisers were pulling out. His own board was calling for his resignation for failing to control his daughter, whose actions now threatened their entire corporation. He had called Bianca, screaming at her with a fury she had never experienced. "You foolish, idiotic girl," he had roared over the phone. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just pick a fight with a waitress. You declared war on Adrian Sterling on my behalf. He's going to ruin us." The relationship between Bianca and Damien shattered just as quickly. After a night of bitter, screaming recriminations at Damien's penthouse, where she blamed him for not stopping her, and he blamed her for her monumental stupidity, the end was swift. "You have to fix this. Damien." She had cried, her face blotchy and swollen from hours of weeping. "Call him, apologize. Do something, fix this." Damien laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "There is no fixing this. You don't fix a direct insult to Adrian Sterling. He doesn't accept apologies. He accepts total surrender and complete annihilation. My company, my life's work is over because you couldn't stand the thought of a pretty waitress breathing the same air as you. It was your fault. You were staring at her." Bianca shrieked, falling back on her initial pathetic excuse. That was the final straw. "Get out," Damien said, his voice dead. "Get your things and get out of my apartment. Now." "You can't throw me out," she screeched. "I'm Bianca Vance. You're a liability," he retorted, turning his back on her. "And I'm cutting my losses." For Damien, the situation was far more complex and far more terrifying. His 9 a.m. call with the Jensen Group was a bloodbath. They were invoking the reputational damage clause in their investment contract. They were pulling their funding effective immediately. The call with Kenji Tanaka's consortium was even worse. Tanaka, a man who valued honor and respect above all else, was personally insulted by Damien's association with the incident. "You have brought shame upon yourself, Sterling-san Tanaka," had said his voice, ice cold over the speakerphone. "We can no longer be in business together." By lunchtime, Sterling Innovations had lost over 60% of its market value. A mass exodus of talent began as key engineers and executives, smelling blood in the water, started sending out their resumes. The company was in a death spiral. Desperate, Damien did the one thing he never thought he would do. He drove to the Sterling Enterprises Tower, a monolithic black skyscraper that dominated the city's skyline, and begged for a meeting with his cousin. He was made to wait in the cavernous, intimidating lobby for 3 hours of public humiliation for a CEO who was used to being ushered immediately into any office he chose. Finally, he was summoned to the top floor. The office was larger than his entire apartment, a stark, minimalist space with a single massive oak desk and a breathtaking view of the city. Adrian was not behind the desk. He was standing by the window, looking out his back to the door. "Adrian," Damien began, his voice cracking slightly. "Thank you for seeing me." Adrian didn't turn around. "I'm not seeing you, Damien. I'm allowing you to speak to my back for 2 minutes. Your time started when the door closed. The cold dismissal was like a slap in the face." Damien swallowed his pride. He was here to beg. "Adrian, I am so sorry. For everything. What Bianca did was unforgivable. I should have stopped her. I was weak. I take full responsibility." "No, you don't," Adrian said, still facing the window. "You take no responsibility. You're just here because your little house of cards is collapsing. You're not sorry for what happened to Anya. You're sorry for what is happening to you." "That's not true," Damien insisted, his desperation rising. "I will do anything to make it right. I'll issue a public apology. I'll donate to the foundation. Name a price. Adrian. Anything." At that, Adrian finally turned. His face was a mask of cold fury. "A price," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You think you can put a price on what you allowed to happen? You think you can buy forgiveness for the public humiliation of my wife." He walked slowly towards Damien, his presence filling the room, sucking all the air out of it. "Let me tell you what's going to happen. The Jensen Group and Tanaka's consortium have already sold their shares in your company. Guess who bought them?" A cold dread seized Damien. Adrian smiled, that chilling, mirthless smile. Through a series of shell corporations, of course. As of an hour ago, I am the majority shareholder in Sterling Innovations, and as the majority shareholder, my first order of business will be to call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. My second will be to liquidate the company's assets and shut it down permanently. Damien stared, his mind unable to process the words. Liquidate, shut it down, but why the technology is worth billions? The patents alone. You could absorb it into Sterling Enterprises. Why destroy it because it's yours? Adrian said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Because I don't want your company. I don't want your patents. I want to watch you lose everything. I want you to feel the same helplessness my father felt when your father tried to destroy him. I am not just taking your company, Damien. I am erasing it. By the end of the year, it will be as if Sterling Innovations never existed. The sheer breathtaking cruelty of it left Damien speechless. This wasn't a corporate takeover. This was an execution. You can't, Damien whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. I can. Adrian stated the words, an epitaph. And I will. You have 60 seconds left. I suggest you use them to say whatever last words you have. You and I will never be in the same room again. Damien looked into his cousin's implacable steel-grey eyes and saw no mercy. He saw only the finality of a judgment passed down from on high. There was nothing he could say, nothing he could offer. He had lost. His father had lost the war a generation ago, and now he had lost it again. He turned without another word and walked out of the office, a broken man. As the heavy doors closed behind him, he heard Adrian pick up his phone. Carter Adrian's voice said, calm and clear, "Proceed with the liquidation, and get my wife on the line. I want to take her to lunch." 3 months later, the dust had settled. Damien Sterling was a ghost, his company liquidated, and his name erased from the world of finance. Bianca Vance, a social pariah, had been exiled by her own family to save their crumbling reputation. In their place, Anya Sterling had risen. No longer a secret, she embraced her role as the formidable chairwoman of the Sterling Trust, captivating the public, not with her story, but with her substance. At a press conference, she launched her masterwork, the Phoenix Initiative, a fund to empower women who, like her, had been underestimated. Adrian watched from the front row, his pride evident. The scandal had not broken them. It had solidified their partnership. That evening he revealed his final move. He had quietly acquired the disgraced Vance Media. His plan wasn't to destroy it, but to gift it to Anya. Imagine the voices you can amplify, he told her. The company that tried to silence you will now become your megaphone. Anya looked out at the city, no longer a shadow, but a queen with a newly acquired kingdom, ready to reshape the world. And so, a ripped dress became the catalyst for the fall of one empire and the glorious rise of another. Anya's story teaches us that true power isn't about the clothes you wear or the name you carry, but the strength and grace you hold within. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most to say. What did you think of Adrian's ultimate revenge? Was it justice, or was it too ruthless? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these intricate tales of drama and redemption. If you were captivated by Anya's journey from the shadows into the spotlight, please don't forget to hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a dose of empowerment and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable dramas. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. Thank you for listening.